Morning, Colin. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Ryan?
Well, it's New Year's Eve, and you're about to go skiing, and I'm about to go hang out with my kids. So I think we've got slightly different agendas for the rest of the day, but we'll be able to rally back and forth. And we got introduced to a friend of you, and actually it sounded like a business classmate of yours, Ken, who I met at the Rhodium Weekend with Chris Yates, which is a great community of online entrepreneurs. But when we got the introduction, I was like, oh my gosh, well, you sold the business and you're trying to figure out what to do next. And I'm like, well, this is perfect opportunity. Let's just capture it on the show. So for the people that aren't familiar with you or your background, so how did you get into becoming an entrepreneur? Was it something in school? I know Ken's got a little bit of the entrepreneur bug as well. So what's the backdrop and how did you guys get to know each other?
So I met Ken both through, there was an entrepreneurship club in school that I was a member of. And then he skis as well. So I think he'll be out here in February, but
nice.
We kind of were friends on both aspects of that. And I've kind of always had an interest in doing stuff myself, but I never knew, what I was going to do. I went to school.
Family or friends that were entrepreneurs?
My grandfather had a pretty big HVAC company growing up that kind of through shitty people and legal things kind of dissolved and now reformed. But and then both my parents have more regular jobs. My dad's an engineer. My brother and sister are engineers. My mom kind of worked while we were in school, but kind of more on the side.
Nice. So then did you go to school? Was it like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or was there like some random opportunity that popped up in front of you? Or?
So yeah, I went to school. I studied finance. I did well. I graduated honors. I could have had a job in the city. I had internships every year. And I was like, I don't want to go work in some whatever job. So I was like, whatever, I'll ski for a year. So me and my girlfriend moved out here to Bozeman right after graduated, worked the summer, just waiting tables, and then moved out here to ski for a year. I waited tables out here for about a year. And my first winter here, I skied like 92 days. And at the time, I ice climbed a lot. I probably ice climbed like 30 something days too. I mean, I was outside 6-7 days a week.
That's awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
How many skiable days are there? So you got 92 days in.
I think lifts turn about 130, 120, 130.
Yeah, that's pretty good then.
So yeah. And then, so worked out here, was waiting tables, and I'm a friendly person. I talk to everyone. Like my question is like, when I'm waiting tables, I'll always ask like, what do they do? What's going on in town? Like, how do you make things work here? Because I mean, when I moved here, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house was $1,200 a month. And you're like, cool. If I get roommates, I basically live for free. Like my student loans were more than my rent by double. And then, I mean, since then, Bozeman's kind of been blowing up and rent's a little more than that now. But it's like, no one can make any real money here. I mean, you can go get a job at a bank and make like $35,000 being a loan officer. It's like, this is shit. I was making the same amount of money waiting tables 4 days a week at night. So it's like, and so everyone seems to work for themselves out here, which I think is awesome, and it's from being out here. I don't want to like be rude to anyone, but people on the East Coast are a little faster and a little like more aggressive. People here are just kind of slow and lazy. And like, everyone just recreates. And it's like, I'll go ski hard in the morning and then I'll get up and then I'll come back and I'll go to work and I'll work hard and I'll work late. And it's like, people recreate and then fuck off for the rest of the day. And it's like,
what do they call powder days? What is it that no one has any friends when there's fresh powder?
Yeah. And it's unbelievable. So like, you'll be up here, you'll go up to Bridger before it's open. Like it'll be a Tuesday and maybe it snowed a foot or 6 inches or something. And it's like a Tuesday and the mountain's not even open. So you have to hike up the mountain and the parking lot's full. And you're like, does anyone work? Right.
So I'm assuming you met like a crazy amount of people when you were waiting tables. So like, where did it get to the point where you're like, okay, well, maybe I should jump into business for myself, or did you end up purchasing the business? And
I look around at stuff all the time. And actually there was I look on Biz Buy Sell and Craigslist, and like, I wake up in the morning and I just troll the internet of things that I'm looking for. So it was a while. I think it was spring of 14. I think it was 14. I reached out to a broker who was posted a cleaning company for sale. I'd never even thought about commercial cleaning as a business, and it's like, I guess everyone needs that. And they were, there's a difference in my mind, I'm sure you agree with, between having a job and profit. And it was like, people are like categorizing, yeah, it's like if you're doing all the work and you're working 80 hours a week, that isn't profit. You just have a decent paying job.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like the value wasn't even close to what the value was.
So I'm curious, Colin, because before you elaborate on that, is how did you get into that mindset, right? I mean, so for being fairly young, and then also like, how did you determine that you were like, trolling the internet for companies? Like, so what were some of the building blocks that got you into that mindset, even understanding what you just said?
And I don't really know. I mean, I'd always like do side stuff when I was younger just to make money. Like I cut lawns, or I know I guess that's just kind of how I'm wired. Like, I don't think it's necessarily like I didn't learn that in school or in anywhere. I think it's just kind of like what I've.
None of your finance classes were talking about, like the difference between wages and like actual profit and what a company is valued at or anything.
No, and I mean, looking back too, like I didn't really read much about business. I didn't like listen to podcasts. I was just like, I knew I could make money doing something else. Yeah, it's not.
Awesome. So like, what was it like when you're going through and you're looking? It's kind of like when you're looking at houses where as you're shopping around, you're starting to learn the market of what's going on, what different things are priced at, and stuff like that. Like, how did you get to the point where you're like, okay, so if you're making 30, 40 grand or 50 grand doing it as a teller, I'm assuming any of these higher paying jobs, you're how did you get to the point where you're like, okay, this is what a company is worth and this is its salary? I mean, like.
Well, so you're gonna laugh. The company I bought, I paid $5,500 for it.
Shit, what?
So I looked into that company that I was looking at, and they were just asking an absorbent amount for something that they had few customers and whatever. But and then months later, I saw a post on Craigslist for something that sounded to me exactly the same as what I talked with a broker. And I thought, now there's no broker and they're over it and they're selling it for cheaper. But it was a totally different company. So it was a couple who are now married, super nice people. They had like one employee at the time, maybe it was two. They had one or two employees. They kind of varied. And they basically, he was an engineer, got laid off, and she was in grad school, and they kind of did it as a means to an end. Like they were just paying their bills because the economy had gone down before. And then basically he got offered a job, and she finished school and didn't want to do it anymore. He hated it the whole time. He despised everything about it. But they did everything right. They had an accountant. They used QuickBooks. They had contracts. They did everything right. And they did a good job. But they basically, they told all their customers they're closing down. And then they posted it for sale on Craigslist the next day.
How does that work?
It makes no sense. It's like, do you not want any value out of this? So then basically my offer to him was like, either I can pay you a set amount now, and then we can go and get these customers back, and I'll pay you a percent. Like I'll basically pay you an amount for every customer we get back.
Yeah,
and I would have paid him 3 times as much, and he wanted nothing to do with it. And I was like, well, I'll write you a check for $5,000. You can like go away. And that's what he wanted. So I think we settled on $5,500 instead of $5,000.
So did they? I mean, that's ridiculous. So, what was the top line revenue that they were making as a couple?
So I think that year, like if you did a like trailing 12, they would have done like $85,000 in sales.
Really?
So I couldn't tell you what they made because they did a lot of the cleaning. They had an employee. But I mean, they were probably making $50,000 together, something like that. And then so our first month, I did like $3,400 in sales. So I went back and I knocked on every door, every client, and basically everyone who didn't already have a contract stayed on. But there wasn't much. Yep.
So that was in 2014. So what was your, like, when you did that, what was the mindset? Like, was it, I'm going to build this? Did you have like any kind of goals from top line, from profit? Like, what was your mindset going into that? What was the ultimate goal?
So I guess I didn't have too much like goals and thoughts until I left my job waiting tables. So I closed September 15th. And then I had a friend who cleaned at the Yellowstone Club, and he hated it. So I was like, hey, I'll hire you to do this. I'll pay you more money, and then your job's in town. It's flexible. So I hired him, and then I helped do a lot of stuff. But basically I had two employees from the beginning who did everything. And then I still waited tables because I still had to pay my bills. Because I mean, as you know, just because we do the work doesn't mean I got paid yet. So it's like, and for the time, $5,000 was all I really had.
That's awesome.
So I basically And then my mindset was just to grow. Like, I don't care. We were always cheaper, and I just wanted to get all the work. And I figured if we can get to be big enough, then I can start making money, and then I can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to get as much business as possible. We grew fast. I mean, I did that. There was that first year. There was that first, 3 months. And then the next year we did like 175,000 in sales.
Good for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And right around the new year right around when 14 ended, I quitted my job waiting tables. I had bids out for 2 contracts that were worth more than what I made waiting tables. And I was like, well, forget it. I got to figure this out.
That's so awesome. So what were some of the other milestones? So you get to 175 the second year. And then what was some of the other growth milestones? And then at what point, so you got the growth in the revenue, but then also in the profit, where you did you hire additional people, and were you trying to lock in contracts? What were some of the
Yeah. So basically, I had that first 3 months, and then I quit my job, and now this is what I was doing. And I was living off like $1,000 a month. Like, I was paying my student loans, my rent, and that was kind of all I had. And then all the money went back, because every time the way we structured it is every time you get a new contract, and it's not a much of equipment, but you buy a vacuum, you buy supplies, and that all stays in the building. And then, so every time I start an account, it's not much, but it's probably $700.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're growing fast, I mean, we probably took on, 40 accounts
mm-hmm.
in the first year and a half. So it's a lot of stuff.
Right.
And you're just kind of pouring that all back in. And then at one point I realized I just put in it was a bigger contract that I got. And I just put in there that we get paid, we pre-bill. So we start on the 1st and you get a bill from me.
Mm-hmm.
And no one said a word. And from then on out, we just pre-billed everyone. And I was like, awesome.
That's awesome. Like, all you got to do is ask, right?
Yeah. It's like, we have terms, like my supplier, I have 30-day terms. And then I put it on a credit card at the end of the month. So I have 60-day terms, and I'm getting paid in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, this is awesome. So when you start a new account, it doesn't cost me a penny.
Mm-hmm.
I get paid before, and pretty much the profit from the first month paid for the stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's like, now I'm cash positive. I can grow as fast as I want.
So what was some of the things that you did? And now that you're doing that, you got cash in the bank and able to fund stuff.
And it wasn't, I guess it didn't change too much, but it just stopped stressing me out. So now we could grow more. So that first year we did 175, and the next year I think we did 350.
Good for you.
And then I was running around with my hair on fire, and I was like, this sucks. Like, I couldn't handle it. I was underwater, and we were just like, because I think around then I finally got an office. Maybe like maybe after the first year and a half, I got an office. So I was like interviewing people in coffee shops, and like people don't show up, and it's just a waste of time. And you're like wasting your whole day like dicking around trying to figure out what you're going to do. And then I got an office for super cheap, and then I think that made a big difference. And then now we're like a little more professional. Mm-hmm. I think it helped with hiring, because people don't want to meet you at a coffee shop. Like, what is this company?
Well, let's meet on the ski hill, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
go ahead.
Oh, and then right around the end of that second year, I hired who then became my GM for 3 years. Or maybe it was the end of the first year. Yeah, end of my first year. So he was with the company for 3 years when I sold. And so he helped me fix everything. He was awesome. He works harder than anyone I know. And
where'd you find him?
So he got a job, like most of our employees are part-time. So he got a job for us working to save up to go to Thailand for a month. So he was working at Target, and then he got a job here just to save extra money. Like a lot of our staff, a lot of them are like, it's second jobs. So we get a much higher caliber applicant who wants to work like 2 extra hours a night, 2 to 3. And that's kind of how I directed all my ads, is you want that person like who works really hard, who maybe has kids, who's like maybe got hurt and needs to pay off some medical debt, or, shit happens. Mm-hmm. So it's like those people are a lot better caliber applicant than someone who like wants to come clean full time. Mm-hmm. It's an exhausting job. And frankly, you could make more money full time somewhere else.
Interesting.
So we kind of got,
how many employees?
They didn't stay around as long, but they worked really hard the whole time they were here.
That's awesome.
And you kind of know that when you hire them.
How many employees did you have when you sold?
I think we had 43.
43. Wow. All part-time?
Yep. Minus like managers and stuff like that.
That's awesome, dude. So how about the other top? I don't know if you're comfortable sharing some of the top line and bottom line numbers before you end up selling, or.
Oh yeah, no, I don't care at all. So so then we did, so I guess I did 350, and then basically I cut a bunch of stuff back. And then the next year, and we just kind of made everything organized. So all of our stuff like got way better. I finally set up an inspection software that I wanted. It's the tablet program. So we have every floor of every building broken down by everything we do. So it's like, you'll know this is second floor office 2F. And then the inspector can click on the thing and say like, okay, the table wasn't wiped down, the floor needs to be back, and you can take pictures. And then it's corresponding to the map of the building. And
oh my gosh, super cool.
So everything got way better organized just because I had the time to do it. I was paying for the software the whole time, but I never set it up. And then we kind of cut back. Every time we'd take on a big account, I'd get rid of some small ones because it's so hard to train someone on like, there's all these little offices that are like, 3,000 square feet and maybe have 8 people, and they want you to do it once a week, and once a week sucks. So it's like, because then you got to train someone on 5 to 10 buildings, depending how big they are, versus if you clean a bank, you train them on one bank, and you can train them in 3 nights and you're done. And then it just goes to quality control. How
are you finding the accounts?
So this is the best part. When I bought the company, we were the only company with a website.
That's a good differentiator, right?
Yeah. So in the website, I mean, it worked fine. To my opinion, it wasn't very good. The old owner made it and I just left it. So we were always first in Google. So when it's one of those things, everyone's on contracts. And everyone else's contract has a 30-day opt-out, which we didn't have. Ours were just auto-renewing 1 year. So because in the beginning, they were just 1 years, and then no one cares about the janitor. They're just like, you're the ghost. You show up, you do your job, you go home. It was like, you do a good job, you never hear from them. Like, I'd have clients I wouldn't talk to throughout the whole year. And I mean, they love us. We do a great job. They know they've had shitty companies. They know we do a good job, but they don't want to talk to you.
Right. Your customer service department is not as big as some other companies.
Yeah. So it's just like, so then it would come time to renew, and I feel annoying just asking them, hey, like bugging them over and over again, can you sign this contract? It's not they're not happy. They're like, yeah, whatever, just keep cleaning the building, we'll keep paying you. So then we just started making them all auto-renewing, and they didn't have opt-outs. And I didn't have any issues with that either. Everyone was fine with it. And I just did it out of convenience. Whereas every other company in town has 30-day opt-outs. So if they're doing a bad job, they can get fired.
Did you know with hindsight, or maybe did you have foresight, or is it more hindsight of realizing that was value creating in the business too?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, my mind, so I guess your question before too was like, what was your goals? Like my opinion was, I want to get this company to $1 million in sales. And then I was either going to be done with it, or I was going to diversify and go, okay, let's start a landscaping company. Let's start this. Because like if I can get, if I got 20% of the clients to say, let's do landscaping with you guys, then that's a $200,000 business. Like that's worth starting. And then I could hire someone to run it. And we never got to that point, but that was my goal the whole time. And then I did everything to set it up for that. So I'd always have my auto renewing contracts. I'd always try to make things more long-term because then it is able to sell. And then last year we did like 460 in sales, and then we sold this year. So I think the company should do about 675 this year. It's not my books anymore. I was hoping to do 700, but I kind of got lazy. We posted it for sale in the spring, and I kind of stopped taking on business because I wanted an easy transition. So we would have done 750 had I still been doing it.
Wow, that's awesome. So, and did you actually was Google your main source of leads, or?
At 95% of our leads, people just called me. Like they'd literally call my phone, or they'd fill out, if it was an engineering company or any kind of like tech thing, they'd fill out the form online. And if it was any other company, they'd call my phone.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was unbelievable. So I mean, we were first in Google the whole time. We still are. So it's like, and it didn't take any extra money or whatever. It was free. And it's like there's so much value in those leads, because then I mean we cherry picked them. So like stuff would come in that we wouldn't want, and I would just refer it to someone who I knew who had a smaller business who wanted the leads. And then it's like I don't have to say no. I would just send them to them. I'd CC them an email and say, hey, we're not taking on accounts of this nature. Please please talk to these people. And then I would just email connect them, and the client's happy and we're happy and they're happy.
So you had mentioned that there's so much value in those leads, and you were talked about like a diversification with landscaping, like why? So I'm curious on what got you to the point that you're going to sell and why, and then versus taking those leads of all those, and how many customers did you have? Because I mean, like you could sell more stuff to those same customers who are already working with you.
Totally. And so the funny thing is, when we went to sell, I think we had around 60 customers. And by the time I closed on the sale, I cut it back down to 40. The revenue was actually higher, but I started just getting rid of small ones because I wanted to make it so the person taking it over has the easiest time ever running a company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like at this point, I was already like, the company kind of started to run itself. And it's the small stuff that's annoying. Like, I don't want to train the new owner on like all these dinky little accounts that don't create value. Mm-hmm. So every time we get a big one, I get rid of a couple small ones. Or it was like every time we'd put good employees in the small ones because they were kind of a hassle. So whenever that person would like something, they'd move or something happened, we would kind of just stop doing a lot. We'd reassess them. Mm-hmm. So we'd leave them the way they are until something happens, and then we'd reassess it. So when we sold, we had 40 instead of 60.
Wow.
Like the revenue still went up.
Mm-hmm. Why did you sell? I mean, what was the reason and what was the triggering point that said, you know what, it's time instead of the $1 million?
Yeah. So I was just bored. Like, I mean, I do the same thing every day. I hire the same kind of people to do the same kind of jobs. And I love all our employees. Like, our business is our employees, you know, like there's nothing else. I mean, yeah, you have contracts, but like the business is the employees. And it took those years to find those people. I mean, that's your hassle. Mm-hmm. You know, I would go to interview someone. I'll get 15 responses. 10 of them might show up, and 1 or 2 of them is hireable. And so I spend a third of my time. I mean, I probably spend half my time doing HR and probably a quarter or a third of it hiring. And it's just like, you're like, really?
You ever think about just hiring that out though? Or finding someone you ever think about hiring that out? Cause like, I'm just trying to, cause there was a gentleman on my podcast recently, and I think there's a lot of interesting dynamics when you're at the revenue and the profit size that you got to, where you got enough sustainable income, and it's moving into something that's not just a job. You got profits that are, and you can hire a $75,000 person that is there. And again, you're not going to be potentially making as much profit if you're the owner right now, but you're creating more value. Was there a breaking point there? Or?
No, because all of our work was at night. So like everything at night kind of ran itself. Like I had management that was doing that. And it's like, I kind of like having something to do, and I kind of like hiring these people. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a time thing. And yeah, I thought about hiring someone to do it, but I kind of like it. And because in my mind, and everything's different, but the way I look at business too is like, if I give 110%, or if I care 110%, my managers might care 100 and my employees are going to care 90. You know, if I take that down to 100, and then it trickles down from there. So it's like, I kind of like meeting everyone and having them know that I care about them and I care about the quality of work and I'm present. And I think that makes a difference in the business. And I might never see them again after that. Like they'll come in, they'll interview with me, they'll have an hour orientation with me where I set them up and go over values and go over what the job entails and put them in the system. I might never talk to them again, but it's like, I really valued that part of the job. Mm-hmm. And I think that made a difference. And like, we do care, like I did genuinely care about our staff, you know, like someone's car would break, they can borrow a van, or it's like, if someone needs something, or like, you know, anything we could do to help anyone, we would do. And it was like, I wanted them to know that. And that's how I feel in general about anyone, but it's like, especially staff.
No, and I think that's awesome too. And I guess and that makes sense. And what I'm trying to figure out, Colin, is like, so you said you're bored, but you also enjoy doing that. So was it to the point where you couldn't decouple yourself from that and keep the business as an investment, or was there a reason that you still do? Kind of understanding the part of the question. I'm trying to figure out like, what was the...
Yeah. So for me, the fun part was figuring it all out, and it just stopped being exciting. You know, it was like, I hire people for the same jobs, the same stuff, and it's repetitive. Yeah, we're really good at it and we do a better job than everyone. And when we sold, we're the biggest company in town. It was like, I feel like I was just like, I already did it. Like, I didn't want to be the company that was in 5 cities, because I think that's just going to be a nightmare. So I was kind of like, we are probably, you know, I could have, in 2 more years, I would have been doing, I bet, close to $2 million in sales. And financially, I should have kept going and done that. But I was just, I mean, I'm getting bored. I think it showed. Like, I wasn't as excited. I don't get my managers excited. Like, it's not, my heart's not in it anymore. Mm-hmm. So I was just kind of, I figured it was better if I just do something else, because it's fun learning it and figuring it out. So if I could find a different company to grow, and especially when I can grow bigger, you know, like this was going to get to $2 million, I think, and then it was going to kind of start capping out. We'd have to start going other cities. So I was just kind of I sold too early, in my opinion, but I sold when I wanted to.
Well, and it's interesting because I think you articulated it in a really good way where I think, I mean, honestly, I'm the same way where like there's so much of what we're doing on a daily basis that has to do with like the internal passion, because the passion and the fire makes everything and all the headaches super easy. But when that dims and it goes out, you're like, this is the worst. And it's easy to just dump things. And I think a lot of people struggle that have been on the show or even Entrepreneurs Count. We're like, is there a point, like being able to balance that? Like, okay, I'm going to get this thing self-sustaining to the point where it's not my baby and it can be an investment. So it's kicking off 100 grand in cash. It's potentially worth, 3 to 500 grand, but then you're reselling to additional customers or you're using that cash flow to invest in other places. But it's difficult to like separate the emotion and the fire and the drive from the actual financial reasoning behind it.
Yeah. And I totally agree. Like, I think now I could go and I could own 5 businesses and they can all, but I'm not as attached to them. They're not like, this was my business. And I think I needed to sell it and then I can do that. Because I had everything I wanted from 3 years ago. I was making awesome money. I had tons of free time and I could do what I wanted. It snowed, I went skiing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice day. I went out in the river. And don't get me wrong, I worked my ass off, but it was like, I could do what I wanted. I had everything I wanted. And it was like, now I want something different.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because when we did, like, so just a little bit of context. So my dad, when he started the company, grew it up to all the employees that we had. And then we did, it was kind of a turnaround. So I ended up firing and rehiring about 60 out of the 100 people, or some kind of ratio like that. And so it became my baby, where he was all of a sudden detached from it, right? Where it's like, because it's my people, my thing, it was a kind of a reflection of me. And then after we've sold and going through this, it's like you kind of have this distance now where it's like not that big of a deal. It's more of like a system and machinery than it is of like an extension of you. So you can make more like objective decisions instead of having everything emotion. I don't know if did you kind of experience that kind of evolution throughout the whole process?
And part of this too, selling for me is like, I'm going to do this, I imagine, the rest of my life. So it's like, I wanted to learn how to sell a business. So it's like, there's even a huge value in that to me, of just like, it's something new to learn. And I think now that the business sold, I'm done training, and and I think this is just how stuff goes, but a couple of key staff have left. And I think it was, new people everyone does everything differently. So it's like, they're going to do it their way. They're going to hire their own key employees. And the ones that don't fit their vision or what they're doing are just not going to be there anymore. And it sucks, but it's like, now that they're not there, I'm not attached to it anymore. Because now it's their people and now it's their stuff. And it's not, it's not like, I don't feel like you said, I'm not attached.
Responsible. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I feel responsible for those people. Like, I feed their families, So I want to make sure they're taken care of and everything's right for them. And I feel stressed for that,
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of like, well, how did, I saw this guy speak on a panel recently, and he's like, yeah, I got 50 employees. Everybody's got an average of like 4 people in their family. So I literally feed 200 mouths every single day. And it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to make their job fun. Like, everyone that worked for us, like, people who had other jobs, like people who are young and didn't know the difference, just think of it as a job. People who worked a lot of places, like, know the difference and know how awesome it was to work for us. And I like that. I think that's awesome. That's how it should be. Like, you shouldn't have to work for shitty people or shitty companies. It's just like,
there's a lot of freedom today to be able to work where you want, which is why there's more and more value being placed on culture for the companies too. And I don't know, we don't have to digress on that, but it is amazing because it's so hard to find people, especially in today's economy. So yeah, you have to make it fun. First of all, because you should, but then also it's what keeps the company together. To go back, kind of when you say you wanted to learn how to sell a business, so like you probably have a handful of things that come right to the top of your mind of like, okay, here's some big takeaways and big, monumental things that I learned. Curious, like where would you start and what would be some of the top takeaways?
So when I'm torn, so I sold it myself. I didn't hire a broker. I look into businesses all the time, and 85% of business brokers I think are morons, and I hate using them. Like, I hate even talking to them. So like, the last thing I wanted to do is hire a business broker. But if I did it again, I probably would hire one.
Okay, so why?
Just because I'm I'm a I'm a fairly aggressive person. Like I'm curious and I ask a bunch of questions and I annoy people in a good way. But like I'm like kind of quick and annoying. So if I like and I think that makes stuff come off the wrong way. Like it almost comes off as like I'm eager to sell and it's not. I'm just like excited to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I met and I like that I sold it because I met a lot of really cool people and like people who are looking at businesses or people who are interesting. And what I lack out here is everyone out here has like I always have friends to ski with or climb with or bike or raft or whatever I want to do that day. Everyone does that kind of stuff and everyone's into it. But people who like work hard and have something to talk about, there isn't as much of that. So it was really fun selling because I get to have all these conversations with random people who obviously succeed in life. If they're buying a business, they've succeeded somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a lot of fun for me, but I think you need to set yourself apart from it. You can't be the one because you're emotionally attached. And it was like, I think things come off the wrong way. Not that I'm not capable of doing it, but they come off the wrong way. And the buyer actually, the person who ended up buying it actually hired a broker to help facilitate it out of his pocket, obviously for a smaller commission.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked having him around.
Just an intermediary that's able to like take and digest both sides and both people's opinions.
And it's good to have someone in the middle because everyone gets attached. So it's like you're getting close and we're like fighting over like terms. And you're like, I don't know, I'm a very reasonable person and I'm not gonna blow something up over something stupid, but a lot of people won't. And it would suck, like it sucks to ruin a deal. So if the broker's not making money if it doesn't get done.
Right. What were some of the sticking points in the terms?
So I have no recourse so I finance 50 grand of it and there's no personal guarantee. I'm first in line on the business, but there's no personal guarantee. And that was like a firm point on his, which I get, like you're selling a business, you want training to work. So it's like, if someone screws you over, you can tell them to fuck off on 50 grand. So, and I think that's more of an ego thing than anything, but that's what was in our package. So it's like, I get whatever, $1,000 a month for a couple of years. So
what were to maybe go back to, as you're about to list, well, you didn't list it, but you did it yourself. And how did you know, and how did you how did you calculate the valuation? And then what kind of like scrubbing up of the finances? Was it like a multiple of EBITDA? Like what was your level of understanding of that? How did you come to the value that you're asking for?
Again, I should have kept it another year and cleaned up my financials and not like, you own a small business, you don't want to pay tax. So like, obviously you do everything you can to not pay taxes. And like with the new tax law coming out, like I prepaid a bunch of shit for the year. So like my numbers weren't good, and that's just how I decided after I paid my taxes that I wanted to sell. So that's how it is. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I could have done to clean things up and make them look better. And we ended up selling later in the year and the numbers start looking better as the year goes on. But it's like, there's a lot of stuff you could have done to fix it ahead of time that I didn't do and I wish I did. But a big thing too is I changed accountants while I was selling, and my accountant, I really like her. I think she's awesome. But like you need someone who's a little more aggressive and you can talk to. And I think that was a big part of it. And basically he was my accountant now is a friend of my attorney and I really like my attorney. And they work together a lot. So it's like having them like go sit in a room and figure out how to reorganize, how we're going to allocate stuff or change things has a huge impact on my tax burden. So it's like, it's tens of thousands of dollars. It's like, I probably paid them $5,000 for facilitating the deal and I probably saved 30 or 40 grand in taxes. It's like a no brainer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that goes along with a lot of businesses. Like I've always put growth and making things work ahead of like personal gain. And I think it works out just by not being cheap. You end up making more money, if that makes sense at all.
No, it does. I think there's, there's not, I think there's two things. One is that you have to have the right people that have actually are familiar with transactions, because otherwise it's not like doing your personal tax returns. Like this is way, way, way different. And then you have to have people that collaborate together, because the terms, conditions, the financing, the taxes, all that stuff is all one topic. Yet it's like 3 or 4 different expertise that need to handle that situation.
Yeah, and just the fact that they work together on a regular basis is awesome. So like they kind of can bounce ideas at each other and say, "Hey, let's do this." And they come. Usually, I'm the one like I like being involved and I like knowing everything. I like doing what I can do, and like they did stuff that I wouldn't have figured out, which is awesome. You know, that's why you pay them.
So what are some of the other things that you learned, and what was that you're going to be using to continue doing this before, over and over again? What was it? Deal structure? Was it taxes? Was it valuation? Like, what was some of the
Well, so what kind of bothers me about the whole situation is they just go off like shareholder income or shareholder discretionary earnings, whatever it is. So it's like you could have, and this, I argued with a bank over this one day. I was like pissed one day, and it was like, because I was looking at a business that was a property management company, and they make like whatever 150 a year, and they don't have any employees to do the whole damn thing themselves. And I was like, this is not income. This is not profit. This is like, 2/3 of this is a job. Mm-hmm. So like, we got to take the job out, and then it's profit. And their banks are just like, nope, it goes by profit. And it's like, this is so stupid. So it's like, I think you can clean things up to make them look better. And I think next time I'm going to try to obviously show more profit closer to a sale, because it's stupid. It's like the company's only worth a multiple of what profit is, and who decides what profit is. And profit's kind of arbitrary. It's like
there's this whole thing too, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called normalizing your EBITDA, or like, essentially taking all the add backs out. I would even argue you could have probably done that with your taxes to show normally, like over a period of time, what is that normalized EBITDA? Mm-hmm. And because a lot of people have where they have the tax man wig, as the tail's wagging the dog, instead of saying, okay, like you still got to be doing certain things. So you want to make sure that you're showing profit. You're going to have to pay some taxes, but all the different expenses that are they're just one-offs, you can normalize that, and then you apply the multiple. I mean, I don't know. So when you saying that the banks are doing this, is this because it's more coming from like financing or something like that? Or
the first person I worked with couldn't get it done because of financing. And that was a mistake on my part. They couldn't afford it. It was just the way it is.
The personal balance sheet didn't afford it.
What?
Their personal balance sheet, like they couldn't come up with money down or something like that.
They weren't even close. It was like, yeah, you guys make good money, but that doesn't mean shit if you can't save any of it. It's like, what are you doing? It blows my mind, because I saw their income and I was okay, so whatever. That's like, they make plenty of money to be able to, like, if they saved a fraction of it, they're fine. Mm-hmm. If they don't save any of it. And it's like their house is 0% down, all their shit is zero, finance all their cars, finance all their shit. It's like, what are you doing with all this money? I have no idea. So, and it fell apart, and it sucks because I wasted a lot of time. Yeah. And it's one of those, like, I wouldn't be so easy to accept an offer. They gave me a really good offer, and that's why I accepted it. But I was pretty close to a couple of the people to, like, they were about to make offers, and I just took it. And that was a mistake in my part. I should have, like, gone through and said, hey, I had this offer, tell them, hey, I'll get back to you in a week, rather than just taking it. Because then I wasted a month and a half of my own time. And then by the time you go back to someone, they're not interested. They're excited about it, and then you tell them no, and now they're not excited about it anymore.
Right.
So then it costs you time, and I probably could have gotten and then you wonder, could I have gotten a better offer had I just waited a week?
Did you do a stock or an asset sale?
It was an asset sale.
Any thought behind maybe doing a stock versus an asset, or?
Well, I had no basis in the company, so it didn't really matter to me. So to me, it was a nominal difference. Like, I would have paid like $2,000 different taxes just because I bought a business for $5,000. So it wasn't a big deal. But I know most time it is asset just because it's cleaner.
But it's ordinary income versus capital gains.
But for me, I paid almost all capital gains.
Well, yeah, because you're low base. Well, if you bought it for $5,500, you would have, you're right, because of the low basis. I mean,
the only thing I paid ordinary on was our inventory and income, which wasn't much.
Got it. So because it was just all the stuff that I'm assuming you're depreciating all the stuff within 12 months or whatever it was. Yeah,
exactly. So it was all depreciated down. So I think like $50,000 of it I had to pay ordinary on, plus like a little bit of inventory, maybe like $60,000 total in ordinary. Mm-hmm. And then he put a large amount into non-compete, which we changed the wording in the contract saying it's just for value purposes. And then we got to take that as
cap.
Yeah. So
Well, and for the listeners, what ends up happening too is that a lot of people, what the buyer will shove stuff into different, like you were saying, different categories, so that way they're getting their tax benefits. But if you just, like you said, you had all employees, and it's a lot of good, it's all goodwill, which is cap gain. So I mean, that's where I'm assuming your advisors that were working on it were rallying to make sure that you had the best outcome net.
And that's the big thing you fight over. And if I were to do it again too, another thing would be to make sure that in the offer, or like in the beginning, I want to know where we're allocating things to. Because you can get an offer for 25% more, but if you're paying ordinary income, you're actually losing more money.
Yep.
So it's like, if you get, and that's what, like, the first buyer I had told me they'll do a stock purchase, and I told them I don't care. Like, it's not something that's
they thought they were being competitive and it didn't matter to you.
Yeah. I was like, I really don't care. I'd rather you pay me a little more. Like, I was like, it's going to hurt you. Like, I'd rather you add $5,000 to the deal and you guys do an asset purchase and help yourself out. And that's what we were going to do had it worked out, but it didn't work out. So
how about, like, was any of the seller or the buyers concerned about employee retention, or was there any, like, how did the deal structure and some of their concerns about employee retention, other things, or, even customer retention impact cash up front, or, any kind of earnouts? Or
there wasn't really much concern with customer retention, just because they're all on auto renewing, and it's not like, they all know me personally, and, like, I assume enjoy talking to me, but it wasn't like, it's not a business where I'm really seen, no one's really seen.
Right.
I don't think there was much concern in our business about that. Had I been an accountant or someone who's like the face of the business, that'd be a big chunk of it. But in our business, it didn't really matter. And employee retention, our key employees are super important. And I can't hire anyone that works for the company for my whole non-compete period, which I think is smart. And I think that, I would have put that in the deal too. But I don't think there was huge concerns. Like, we have decent turnover, just the nature of the business. So an average employee for us lasts about 9 months. Not that I don't have ones that have been with since the beginning and managers that stay around for years, but it's the average employee isn't there that long, that the turnover is natural anyway.
So then were they asking what your systems, and, like, I don't know if you had any of that documented about, like, because I'm thinking if I would have buying that, I'd be like, okay, what's your process for finding these people? If that turnover is part of it, what are the ways to keep that machine turning?
And it wasn't, it's not much. The basics, just, you're hiring people who are qualified. It's like, you're not, and that's what makes me nervous about something else. Like, I've never had to hire someone. We've always promoted from within. So I've never, like, hired someone for an important position. Everyone's just been, and that's kind of how I tell everyone, is like, look, your pay isn't on, you don't get annual reviews and annual, like, wage increases. If you bust your ass, you're going to get rewarded. If you don't bust your ass, you're not going to get rewarded. Your wage is going to stay the same. And it's not like I don't do it in a set way. And I think if we got bigger and we had more management, we'd have to kind of figure out a system. But I kind of like being loose about it. So if someone's not working out, we can move on. So it's not, in my mind, it's not a big deal, because you can get trained in a week. So it's not rocket science. You're like scrubbing toilets.
That's awesome. So any other big takeaways that you had that you're happy you learned on this deal, and or anything that you think that someone that hasn't gone through an exit like this might not be aware of?
I think I learned more for purchasing than I did for selling. Just like how, like, if I were to buy a business, I'm going to expect a lot of the key employees to not stay. And just by nature of how it is, it's not like, not because, and hopefully I can have a better impact on that. Like, hopefully they'll like me better, or like I can show what I'm going to do to fix it. Or, like, in my mind, I would do a value add. Like, I don't want to buy a business that's doing very well. A lot of my business isn't doing well, and then kind of build it up from there. But that's something that would make me nervous, is like, you're going to come in and people are attached to the old owner, and it's just how it is. And then that scares me, especially buying something that's kind of out of something that would make you nervous financially would scare me a lot, because you're buying something that you might lose all the staff overnight. and you might keep all of them, but it's like, that's a big fear of mine to start with buying a business now.
Well, just some 2 cents on there. Some creative things that I've seen and we've done for our customers is so whether you're buying or selling. So let's say if it was you selling again. So you'd say, okay, so you don't give them equity. It's called phantom stock. So it's a percentage of the business only when it sells. So they don't have any stockholder like rights or anything like that. So you don't have to keep them involved. But what we end up doing is you can say, okay, I'm going to give you 5% of the business when and if I ever sell. And then, but what you do is you say, I'm going to give you 2% at closing, and then another 1% 6 months later, another 1% 12 months later, another 1% 18 months later. So essentially you're locking them in. It has to be a significant amount of money. Otherwise, someone's going to walk for small. But like what ends up happening is you're think about that. If you're a buyer now, you're like, okay, well, Colin's already locked in his key executives for me. This is fantastic. And during the negotiation, what you can do is actually have the buyer pay for everything after the closing. Because usually the buyer say, okay, well, great, this is fantastic. You've already done this. I'll pay additional. So you're getting it with the value created because it's easier to transfer. So yeah, you're right. Because I mean, there's like people scattering afterwards. It's a huge risk, but there's really cool creative ways you can structure that. So everybody's essentially winning because it's easier to transfer the business.
That's actually a really good idea. I didn't think about that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And literally you can do anything that you can creatively think of, and then you just have to have the documents drafted accordingly, right? Because so many people give like, hey, you're gonna have equity, but the reality is, or first of all, don't do that. Don't give them equity if they don't need it. Like,
and you haven't even worked with them yet. It's like, yeah, they've been in the business for a long time, but they could be stealing shit left and right, and like the old owner had no idea.
Right. Well, yeah, as a buyer, definitely don't do that. But what happens is as a seller, people just randomly give cash or equity to get to that closing point, because they end up talking to their employees and stuff. But it's like, no, you do it, but just tie it to the actual outcome that you want, which is them staying. So you can give them some, but don't give them equity, give them phantom stock and tie it to closing. And then a couple of tranches afterwards. And then it's up to the buyer to keep them or not, but they still get paid out. And usually you're getting additional value and a higher purchase price. So the whole thing should pay for it. It should actually self-fund itself. Make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, and I was going to say the other thing, so the other one is, I feel like, so I had a 2-month full-time training period, and my business is simple, like very simple, very like, everything's like documented and figured, like it's very set up. And like, I feel like I wasn't able to show a lot of stuff that I wanted to show, because you can only learn so much at a time. I can't just dump everything on you at once. I kind of got to show you like regimented of like this. I can show you this stuff. And I kept getting questions like, what do we do with this? I was like, we're going to get to that. Like, I can't just like, you're not going to understand that right now. And I think that period needs to be longer. And I think it's awesome. The new owners are eager and they think that and don't get me wrong, it is super easy, but I think they think it's easier than it is. And they're kind of like, yeah, whatever, we got it. And like all my stuff shut off. And it's like, I am not doing anything. If you leave the admin email on and I can just see it, I'm happy to tell you things that I think would help you, or like if I can see what's going on, I'm here to help. But I think like, and their situation might be different because they just think they got it and it's easy. And I'm sure they do have it, but it's, I would want more support.
Well,
even if
it's interesting too that in kind of on two sides of the coin there is, think about if you had an earnout and there was a significant chunk tied to their success and they still turn everything off. So this is what happens a lot, is that all of a sudden there's new control and you're not controlling anything, but a huge chunk of your payout comes from them succeeding. And so it's like, some serious concern and stress.
Yeah. And that's, I just want everything to work out. So it's like, I just want to help just because that's who I am. But yeah, if I had a big chunk of money in it, I'd be more stressed out than if I was just running the business.
That's a great way. This guy named Alex that I interviewed, and he ended up selling to GoDaddy. And like we were talking about sitting in these meetings where you have no control anymore. And you're just like, even if they're good, even if the buyers are awesome people, you're just like sitting in meetings and being concerned about their success when you have no control is like a horrible internal conflict. You're super stressed out.
Yeah. And that's why I think my ideal purchase is either going to be something that's not working well, that you want to get the other people out and you want to fix it and grow it, or like something where they're just like, they don't see bigger picture and like they're kind of stuck, or somewhere where someone's retiring, they love everything they do, they just can't physically do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they want to stay and they want to help.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think a big part of what I'll buy next has to do with who's selling. And that's kind of hard to tell with a broker because you kind of like, you have to get through enough to find out the situation. But I think that's a big chunk of it is who are you buying from?
Mm-hmm.
Because people, I mean, I do business in a, you know, I do business in a, I don't know how to put it, but I'm not a dick. And a lot of people who make a lot of money screwing people over. And it's hard to tell at first what people's intentions are. So it's kind of, and that's a, you know, it's a judgment call. And I think that's a really big, hard judgment call to make.
What's interesting too is that it's on both sides, you know, so like there's so much of this. It's so interesting. Like when you think about all of the things that have to go perfect. So like you have to like, we have to like, if you and I were buying and selling a company and exchanging between each other, we'd have to agree and trust each other. And then everything else has to go perfect. It's like everything like terms, conditions, the price, all that stuff, that all has to work out perfectly after we like each other. Can you imagine? I mean, going through that whole process where there's so much to be negotiated, if you hate the person across the table is like, it makes the whole thing not work.
Yeah. And then to spend all that time and money on legal and your time and everything that's going on for it to not work out. And I mean, from talking to, and I'm sure you know this too, but it seems like most of the time it doesn't work out.
Over 80% of the time.
What is it?
Over 80% of the time, the companies don't sell. So, oh God, there's some crazy stats. I wish I could pull them all out of my memory on cue, but essentially I interviewed this gentleman who he used to run Harvard Business Review. And then now he's doing this. It's called the Center for Middle Market. And over 50% of like the people that sold had no intentions of selling that year. And over like a same amount of buyers had no intentions of buying. It all just happened through by accident. And so it shows that they're not ready. They had no idea their numbers, all this stuff. It just all this stuff kind of came together. And then, but that's why so many fail is because they didn't have any of this. They weren't ready and they didn't know what they're even asking for. So then you end up arguing with these people and people walk away for the stupidest reasons. Colin, I interviewed this guy named Norm Brodsky who is literally a badass. He was on the cover of Inc. magazine. And so he had documented the entire potential sale of his company. That was part of his LOI. It was like, I'm going to document everything. So he went through the entire sale process in the column of Inc. magazine with Bo Burlingham. And then so Norm decided to sell. And that's what it said on the Inc.'s cover. So Norm decides to sell. And he had found out like in the process that the buyer he didn't trust was like, had different intentions. And this is $110 million sale, by the way. And so he said, you have to call me at noon. And the guy didn't call him at noon. He called him at 12:10. Norm pulled it's literally Inc.'s magazine went out nationwide saying Norm decides to sell and he pulled the deal because the guy didn't call him on time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's all, what's that?
I was going to say, I have a question for you too. What, oh shit, I keep losing my train of thought. So when, oh, fuck, what was I going to say?
Talking about trust in the deals, the buyers and sellers, or how many deals fall apart.
Yeah, what was I going to say? Sorry, never mind. So when they're going to sell, this is the question. Have you had experience in like whether you tell your staff or not? Because I was torn with that for a long time, and I don't even have a good answer for next time. Because part of me like just likes being upfront and honest, and then the other part was like I started telling key people, and they started freaking out.
Oh, totally. Yep. Because you know what ends up happening is because what the things that humans do not enjoy the most is ambiguity, right? That's why people hate change. They love routine. And so you tell employees that they fill their whole world with all these different assumptions. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to have to blah, 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 blah. And they just kind of go down this whole rabbit hole. To go back to your point, and this is a key sticking point for so many entrepreneurs and so many business owners. And I believe that if you do this the right way, that's why our process called growth and exit planning is because you tell like people are not stupid, right? I mean, when you have an owner that's 75, you're going to sell because you're like 10 years away from a hospice. Like, I mean, like it's just physical nature of what's going to end up happening. So people already know this stuff, or generational transfers or whatever. I believe if you take like that employee structure stuff, like I was talking about, you say, okay, here's the deal. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with this business. The goal is to grow it, build a very healthy business where everybody's got good jobs. And for your key staff, so you might have your CFO, your VP of sales, your ops, the key employees, you're tying them to the eventual exit, no matter what it is, right? So whether it's a third party or an ESOP or family transit, you're saying, hey, at some point, this company is going to change hands and you're a key part of that. So we're going to tie your comp plan to EBITDA and to growth and to a transition. So that way, essentially, you're got that they're buying immediately. So like, let's say an out of the blue offer happens, or you think it's time, or you want to start prepping 12 to 18 months ahead of time. You start chatting with them about it because they're all rolling the same direction. You're not telling the people that are on the frontline troops. I mean, for us, we didn't have any of that stuff. So we had to like literally sneak around the office. And I hate lying, right? So you just have horrible like turmoil going on versus I think so I guess to sum up and answer your question directly is that I believe that if you haven't done any of that stuff right off the bat, you don't tell anybody. And it's the most emotionally horrible thing ever. But if you've done some of these mechanisms ahead of time, then you can be open and transparent with the key people that are going to be important for the potential buyer anyways.
Yeah. Because what blew my mind too is staff who like, I might not see for 6 months. They're like really upset that it's selling. And it's like, your job's going to stay the same. Like,
but they don't know that. And you don't know that either, technically.
Yeah. And I guess you're right. But it's like,
so now think about this. Like, let's say I wanted to buy that and, take a different business where it's like the VP of sales is or the sales team's responsible for 75% of the new accounts. And that person goes and gets another job. I'm like, I'm not going to pay you shit for your company because of that. So, and they don't know. And the people are willing to go. I think people are willing to do drastic things for certainty. So to sit and trust me, like my dad and I, it's like, we're selling, we're not selling. We're selling, we're not selling. We did that for 4 years. And for me, emotionally, it's just like, screw this, man. Like, I just want some sort of clarity either way. So I think people it's difficult to ask that of anybody, let alone your staff who are not getting paid tens, 6 figures and the mid 6 figures to deal with that stress.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. So when you do those structures, are you like, obviously they're going to stay through your sale and your transition, but as a buyer, I'd almost be a little nervous knowing they're getting a big payout because are they going to go fuck off or are they going to stay?
It depends. I mean, like,
because now they're like, because before they had a better deal and like the new owner has to kind of give them that deal or better.
So think about this. Let's say if I'm purchasing your company, you've got 3 executives that are making 125 grand that have got some sort of stay bonuses. So let's say they get 100 grand at closing and then 50 grand 6 months in, another 50 grand 6 months in, or 12 months in. Me as the buyer, I'm going, this is awesome because those people have like the CFO knows everything about the books. The VP of sales knows all the customers. I have 12 months to bring in to either win their hearts and make sure that they love the new vision, or I can find right. Or if they're that stupid or they hate me that much, they're leaving 200 grand on the table. That's a lot of money, right? So I mean, like, I think there's enough transition like period there to have it all smooth out.
And I guess you could arrange it too, whereas you as the new buyer, if they don't stay, the buyer can get the kickback, like the 200 grand.
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, that all comes down to kind of negotiation, but so as we're kind of wrapping up for the listeners, and then I know you and I are going to continue rallying after the show, but now that you've gone, from purchasing the company that's quite the return on investment. I don't know the exact dollar amount that you netted, but from 50, from $5,000 to your eventual sale and 43 employees, like, what is there one thing that you want to highlight that we've talked about, or maybe one thing that you want to leave the listeners with that have not gone through an exit yet, and you want to leave them with something that they should take away?
And I guess this is true for everything I do. Everything I've learned and everything I know how to do is from me asking questions. I mean, you can already tell from talking to me that I ask a bunch of questions and it gets to be like too much sometimes. And that's how all my conversations go. So it's like, you can never ask too many questions. You can never learn too much. Like, when I was in business, all I would do is ask other people that do similar things. I'd ask them about what they do about this or that, and I kind of had a network of people that I can bounce ideas off of who have gone through what I'm going through. And people who work hard and like what they do love to talk about it, and their wife is sick of hearing about it, and like they would love to go get lunch and talk to anyone about anything. But it's like you don't learn those things unless you ask. And I think people get so they're like afraid that people don't want to talk to them, or like even like in my mind, even people who are like kind of competition. Like it's fun to BS about what you do and what you're trying to do. And if you don't go and find those people and ask those questions, you'll never learn it. You can only learn so much in a day. But if someone's gone through more than you have, you're going to pull so much more information out of them than you would like trying to figure it out yourself.
Well, and I think to even put a big exclamation point on that is, you've got a big runway in front of you for life. And I think there's a lot of listeners here that they're going to do it once and it's going to be one of their biggest financial windfalls ever. And you don't have the chance to learn on the fly. Right. I mean, so, and one of the big things, and I don't know if you notice this, but like a lot of people get scared to ask the questions because they feel like as the big head honcho, the owner, that they should know all the questions of the CPA and the legal and all this stuff. It's like, you should ask why, because a lot of these advisors don't know what, like the whole picture, and they pretend and they go learn on your dime and on your experience. And so you ask why until you get the answer that you think is sufficient.
Exactly. And don't just go and use the first business broker you sign up with because someone told you to use them. Like I would always interview multiple people and multiple stuff before you do anything. It's like you meet with someone, you think they're awesome, then you meet someone else, you're like, oh shit, I'm so glad I didn't use the first guy.
Right.
And you never know. So it's like, I think you can never ask too many questions. You can never bug too many people. It's only going to benefit you.
So if our listeners want to reach out and ask you some questions or what your best questions are, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm happy to talk to anyone about anything. My phone number, I can just give you my phone number. It's 617-710-1660. And my email is Colin, Colin, B as in boy, ENGSTROM as in Mary at Gmail. And like I said, I don't have anything going on. I like talking to people.
Awesome, Colin. It was an absolute blast having you on the show.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot.